All right, I think we will get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Roman Yavic. Our company is called Learn from Travel, and we are a social enterprise that specializes in faculty-led study abroad programs. We oftentimes organize community-based programs, and we work both with travel programs and with virtual programs, meaning that sometimes we organize conversations like we are right now with Jose. So these kinds of international conversations, this is the second one in the series that we're doing. We're hoping to do these once a month. The recording from our last conversation with Regina Montero from the Nobe Bugueco Marca in Panama will be available soon. You can check our website for that. And I'm just very excited to have all of you join us for our conversation with Jose Aguavil. And I'm also very, very happy to have Ryan on our team. Ryan spent 2 years in Ecuador as a Peace Corps volunteer. He has some amazing stories to share with you. And so I'll pass it over to him for his stories and for the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Roman. I appreciate the introduction. My name is Ryan DeBala. I'm lead guide and business development specialist with Learn from Travel. And today I'm really excited to host this conversation with Jose Shuyun Aguavil. I'll start today by presenting Shuyun. I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself as well. And then I'm going to share a presentation I put together about how Shuyun and I became friends. Hopefully this will give you some insight on how I first became interested in the Tsa'chila people, the culture, the traditional healing techniques, and of course, plant medicine in general. Then we'll dive into a conversation with Shuyun, which I hope everybody will participate in. I don't want this to be just a dialogue between Shuyun and I, so please feel free to chime in, type any of your own questions into the Zoom chat box, and I'll do my best to address those questions. I've also prepared questions for Shuyun, so I'll ask him those in Spanish, but I'll put them into the chat in English. And of course, after Shuyun's done speaking, I'll go ahead and translate what he has said for you. So I'll do my best with that, and hopefully this will work as fluidly as possible. So Jose Shuyun Aguavil is an indigenous leader of the Tsa'chila community El Poste. It's located in Western Ecuador, about 3 hours west of Quito, the capital city. Shuyun is a religious and spiritual healer. And over the past decade, he has devoted his career to traditional healing in various forms. Shuyun's passionate about the preservation of his culture, his heritage, his language, and he works towards this cause every single day. So I'd like to let Shuyun introduce himself briefly as well. Shuyun, Saran Kebinai, Senan Huyun. ¿Usted le gustaría presentarse también? ¿Tienes algunas palabras para presentarse? Tienes que hacer un clic en el mudo. Yo creo que estás en mudo ahí.
Tara Kebihue Kunta Duque Sonjoyue Inbe Cuente Kichun Tankena Pila Mikara Milabe no in Shiliga Taine Honga Duque Hokinayo. Tsanke Panokame Lari Lachimumu Shuyun Hue, Tachifikichi, Manatsankena, Lachi Petofikichi José. Bien. Primeramente, pues, saludándoles tanto usted Kunta y a los señores profesores que están escuchando en este momento. Y yo en mi idioma lo decía, pues, que soy de una nacionalidad Tsa'chila, soy una persona que estoy liderando más que todo para mantener y sostener nuestra costumbre, para no perderlo, ¿no? Y hemos estado luchando durante 20 años para no terminar nuestra costumbre, más que todo dentro de esto, pues existe, usted tiene un poco de conocimiento, ¿no? De que yo también elaboro artesanía, hago también lo que es tema de las medicinas ancestral, juegos ancestrales, todo eso practicamos en nuestro centro cultural Shuyun Tsa'chila.
Thank you, Shuyun. So I think the best place to start this afternoon is to essentially describe how I first met Shuyun and to provide some perspective on how I developed an interest in the Tsa'chila people and their use of medicinal plants. So I was assigned to the little village of El Poste, Ecuador, as a Peace Corps volunteer in 2008. And I was trained as a natural resources conservation volunteer. So I was linked with an agro-artisan association, which is called Shuyun Tsa'chila, of whom Shuyun, or Jose, was the leader of and still is today. And they were developing cultural tourism, and they were looking for help to someone to come into the community and help them, assist them with those efforts. So they were looking for alternatives to unsustainable agriculture in the region, region of Santo Domingo. So I had the great privilege of meeting Shuyun and his family and spending the next 2 years of my life immersed in the Tsa'chila culture. You can see here, of course, there's this giant gringo in the middle of all these Tsa'chila people. This is Shuyun's family. Here we have, of course, Shuyun in the middle with my arm around him there. And then there's Malun, his son. There's Ompi to the right of Malun. And then this gentleman to the right of me is Awedo. That's Jose's father. And then beside Awedo is Sapini. That's Jose's or Shuyun's son. And then little Kimi down at the bottom, that's Shuyun's granddaughter. So just to give you some idea of where Shuyun lives, let me see here. This is Santo Domingo. Santo Domingo it's a mega diverse country, or sorry, Santo Domingo is a mega city, right? There's 460,000 people that live in this city, and it's situated in a mega diverse country, which is Ecuador. So I have a little Google Earth presentation that I'll pull up here real quickly for you guys. I'd like to go ahead and just kind of show you the whereabouts. I think everybody's probably familiar where Ecuador is. It's located on the equator. We have 4 distinct regions. Over here we have the Galapagos Islands, we have the coast, the Sierra, the Oriente or the Amazon to the east. And Santo Domingo is located on the coast. So it's about 85 miles or so to the west of Quito, the capital city. And as I mentioned, it's a city of about 460,000 people. It's the 4th largest city in Ecuador. So you have Guayaquil, which is kind of the port city of Ecuador. Then you have Quito, the capital, which is the next largest city. And then you have Cuenca behind that. And then Santo Domingo is the 4th largest city in Ecuador. To the southwest of Santo Domingo, you have El Poste. So you can see the tiny little town here. It's made up of about roughly 420 inhabitants. And this is where Shuyun lives. This white structure here is Shuyun's house. Across the street, this is the house of Awedo, his father. And I'll zoom out just a little bit here. You can see that this area is relatively forested when you compare it to the rest of the region. This region is badly deforested. And as a natural resources conservation tier, coming here to do reforestation work and to help with unsustainable agriculture, it was eye-opening to see the rate of deforestation. In fact, since World War II, 95% of the western lowland forests in coastal Ecuador have been deforested. So there's less than 5% of those forests remaining, and they are part of what's called the Choco-Andean biodiversity hotspot, which is one of the top 10 most biodiverse regions in the world. So it's very, very concerning to see this happening, especially when we're talking about medicinal plants, traditional ecological knowledge, these things that are rapidly dwindling with the loss of the forest. One thing that was very nice being here in El Poste was you can see all of this forest out here. This is essentially a reserve that's owned by Shuyun's father, Awedo. It's about a 20-acre reserve, and it is being dug into. It's not completely pristine anymore. It's just like much of the forest around it is now just become agricultural land, but they're really working hard to try to sustain this forest, which is really nice to see. And people coming in to learn about the culture also can contribute and help to retain some of those last remaining lowland rainforests. So I wanted to just show you that to give you an idea of where this was in Ecuador. I'll go back to my presentation. And this is Santo Domingo. So just some scenes from the city of Santo Domingo. Here's a scene from El Poste. You can see it's this mosaic of agriculture and remaining lowland rainforest. Many of the houses in El Poste are kind of a mixture of traditional bamboo, also palm beam structure with thatched roofs, and then they're more often than not connected to cement block homes, many of which have been built by the government of Santo Domingo. The municipal government has helped out building some of the sleeping structures. And so they'll have this more modern cement block house that's attached onto the more traditional house. Here's a look at one of the more traditional areas used for cooking. And so I mentioned deforestation. This is a kind of a staggering view of what I often witnessed being a volunteer living in this area for 2 years of my life. This is the Rio El Poste. It runs out of Santo Domingo and runs through the little village of El Poste. And of course, with economic needs and low costs for planting things like yucca and platano and cacao, the incentive to raise the forest was often looming and often very large. And so we did see scenes like this quite dramatically. As a Peace Corps volunteer, my primary projects were working on reforestation. So trying to promote agroforestry in the region, which is kind of like this intersection of agriculture and forestry, bringing trees into cropping and ranching systems. Also, environmental education. I'd go down to the school quite a bit and teach the children about nature, the rainforest, the importance of conserving our watersheds, and the importance of clean water. Finding markets for the sale of handicrafts was also pretty big. So here I am with the kids, of course, trying to instill some love of nature and the last remaining trees in the region. Here we are selling some handicrafts, many of which are made from local seeds of the rainforest, and just trying to take advantage of those opportunities for them to make some money from making handicrafts. One of the other projects we worked on was cultural tourism, bringing international guests into the community and getting them familiarized with the Tsa'chila culture, also learning how to weave. Here's Elvia, this is Shuyun's wife, teaching one of our guests how to weave on their loom. And so this is what they make their traditional mampisampas with. This is also known as a tunan in their language, this rainbow colored skirt. One of my favorite projects was trying to promote ecotourism. So of course, with the reserve there, Shuyun and his family would lead hikes, talk to the guests about medicinal plants, and of course, go bird watching, talk about the many endemic species of plants. There are just it's a prodigious number of endemic plants. I think over a quarter of the plants that can be found in this region of Ecuador are endemic. So that means they're found nowhere else in the world. So every time we're losing a slice of this rainforest, we're losing plants that we'll never be able to replace. So a lot of that education was being done there. And of course, at the end of the day, people often wanted to stay over the night, and of course, the Tsa'chila community wanted them to stay to get a better appreciation and a deeper integration into the Tsa'chila culture. So one of my primary projects ended up being building sustainable housing for tourists to spend the night. So you can see here, this is Caña Gigante, this giant bamboo. It's actually indigenous to Indonesia. It's not indigenous or native to Ecuador, but it's already here in Ecuador, and it grows rapidly and profusely. And so we were using that for many of the internal structures of our buildings. And we're also teaching locals how to go about building with bamboo. This is Shuyun's son, Tsapini. And here's us with one of these pseudo-finished cabins. This at the time still needed a paint job, and some of the doors needed to be put on, but that's essentially what that one ended up looking like. Now, my time in El Poste didn't go without its struggles. Of course, I was sick a lot of the time. For some reason, parasites really seemed to like me. I was afflicted by prostatitis and Leishmaniasis. I dealt with amoebas and roundworm, and it wasn't fun, obviously, and that made my experience very difficult. Many times I dreamed of going back to the United States where I could seek treatment. But fortunately, I live with Shuyun, who's a traditional healer, and he knows a tremendous amount about the plants and what is available for healing locally. And he would always come to the rescue and lend his healing hand. So he introduced me to vapor baths, which were these hot baths that we used to take. He would dig a hole, and essentially it was like a teepee over a hole, and they would heat up the water, make an infusion of medicinal plants, usually 12 or 13 different species of plants, many of which were aromatic. And then he would take these just fiery coals, put them at the bottom of this hole that I would sit over in the teepee, and then they would pour this infusion of plants over these rocks, and you just sit there for the next 15, 20 minutes like a natural sauna. So when I had just as simple as something as a common cold, which I often had in the jungle, being a gringo, not used to my body not being used to the environment, those types of remedies were very, very effective. There's also something known as Olympiasa, which is very common throughout Latin America, but especially with the indigenous healers of the Tsa'chila communities. Olympiasas can involve everything from chanting and singing to cleansing with medicinal plants. So the active making of a bouquet of medicinal plants, also making concoctions and teas that you would drink during the ceremony, and then using that bouquet of plants to act as a cleansing agent as you sit there. And it's a really sort of a one-on-one intimate connection with the shaman that is using the power of personal human touch and just overall attention and time to bring in the good energy and scare away the evil energy that might be afflicting you. So here's an example of one of the many plant ceremonies. This, in fact, was this was an ayahuasca ceremony that was happening here at this time. This is an example of Olympiasa. Here's me, here's Shuyun sucking out the evil energy from my palms. So this is all part of Olympiasa process. So not only was I able to integrate fully into the Tsa'chila culture, paint my hair with a chote, which I think Shuyun will talk a little bit about, learn some safiki, which admittedly is not very good anymore and never really was. And I was forever changed by this very unique introduction to traditional healing medicinal plants. So I want to turn the conversation over now to Shuyun. I'll ask him a few questions. And again, I encourage you just to type into the chat box. And we can just open up this conversation about traditional healing, kind of where he comes from, where he is today, and we'll kind of take it step by step here. So, Shuyun, yo creo que vamos a empezar con algunas preguntas. I'm going to remove my share screen here. Okay, Shuyun. So what I'll do is I'll ask the question in Spanish again, and I'll type that question into the chat box here. So, ¿puedes contarnos un poco sobre la cultura Tsa'chila en un contexto un poco más amplio? Hay plantas muy importantes, especialmente para los Tsa'chila.
Bueno, puedo conversar sobre los Tsa'chila. Bueno, desde mucho tiempo, pues, los Tsa'chila sufrieron lo que es el tema de la viruela y la fiebre amarilla, ¿no? De ahí ha venido un proceso de cambio, ¿no? En cada generación se ha venido dando algunos cambios y entonces últimamente, pues, los Tsa'chila ya no quieren hablar el idioma, ya no quieren tomar su vestimenta. Y de ahí, pues, también, ¿por qué no decir? La parte de medicina ancestral también no es muy practicado, ¿no? Se está hablando aproximadamente que pocas personas están haciendo esta práctica. Y entonces, es por ese motivo, en cada comunidad tenemos esa fortaleza de mantener y sostener de nuestra costumbre.
¿Puede seguir un poco más sobre la importancia de achote?
Bueno, el achote es un árbol pequeño que tiene mucho beneficio, diría en este caso, ¿no? Bueno, del mismo achote nosotros utilizamos para hacer el peinado y del mismo achote también utilizamos mucho lo que es la hoja y la corteza, más que todo para hacer el baño de piedra quemada. Bueno, por ejemplo, en este caso, el pintar el cabello no solamente significa echar la pintura sobre el cabello, sino tiene un significado de vida y significado de que antepasado utilizaron el achote, ¿para qué? Para curar más que todo, ¿no? Entonces, ese es el significado más que todo del achote. Entonces, siempre y cuando hasta ahora, cuando hacemos ceremonia, nosotros utilizamos el achote como un símbolo de purificación y protección.
Perfecto. Entonces, ¿cuándo desarrollaste un interés en plantas medicinales? ¿Era un niño o era adulto? También en las prácticas de hombres sabios, ¿cuándo desarrollaste el interés en esto?
Bueno, en esta parte, yo siempre sé decir primero, no hay que someter a práctica, no hay que nacer. Entonces, ¿qué quiero decir con esto? Quiero decir que yo nací con un don, desde un comienzo, desde niño, ¿no? Pero de ahí viene la enseñanza. En este caso, desde la edad de 6 años, se tiene que ir a un proceso de aprendizaje y a conocer las plantas medicinales.
He doesn't really like the word shaman because it has this context of what we call brujeria in Spanish. That's very, very different from what he does. Brujeria is witchcraft, right? And so he is very concentrated on positive energy and doing good for people and not doing bad. And so he doesn't want me to use the word shaman. I think we actually did use the word shaman in the ad for this webinar, but we're going to go with healer, traditional healer, because that's kind of the context that he wants to put out there into the world. And siga.
Y bueno, aquí quiero hablar de tres partes, ¿no? En este caso, el primer paso es solo aprendizaje de las plantas medicinales. El segundo paso viene a dar cómo preparar las plantas medicinales, tanto como para baños, tanto como para bebida y tanto para en este caso, para masaje también nosotros utilizamos mucho, ¿no? En este caso, líquidos que sacamos de la misma planta. Ahora viene la otra parte que se llama el contacto espiritual. Esta parte y actualmente logré entender que hay dos partes, ¿no? Hay el poder del bien y el poder del mal. Entonces, en este caso, el brujo está siempre inclinado con el poder del mal, pero en cambio, el que está para hacer el bien está inclinado al poder del bien. Entonces, conocemos muy bien todo el mundo que hay dos poderes, ¿no? Tanto el poder de Dios y el poder satánico. Entonces, en nuestra cultura siempre existió esto. Siempre existió, el brujo siempre era el malo de la comunidad y siempre hacía mucho daño, ¿no? Entonces, es por eso que ahora último hay algunos cambios que se han venido dando. Ya también existen las religiones que están sobre la cultura nuestra, entonces hay un cambio, ¿no? El que está inclinado para el bien, pues entonces tiene que hacer bien las cosas para sacar adelante a las personas, ¿no? En este caso, la conexión espiritual primeramente tiene que hacer con el universo. Dentro del universo existen varios espíritus, tanto para el bien y para el mal. Entonces, para eso se tiene que hacer la conexión con el universo, con la misma naturaleza, y dentro de la cosmovisión existen también algunos seres que son espirituales que tienen su sabiduría.
So essentially, one of the really interesting things that's going on now as he becomes an older man and he's been practicing healing for most of his life is that religion has become more prevalent amongst the Tsa'chila people. Most Tsa'chila are now Catholic. They practice Catholicism. There's a church in the community. And so these elements of religion are now being mixed into what was formerly, I don't know if I want to use the word pagan, but non-religion or non-formal religion. And that has changed the healing process. And so on a lot of shaman tables, for example, or a lot of curandero tables, you will see that there are both religious artifacts and then there are more natural artifacts that kind of combine together to form this, this integrated healing system. And one of the things that he said there is that one of the noble truths of religion is do good to others, be a good person, treat others as you would want them to treat you. The golden rules, right? And so this is part of his healing, his duty, and that's really become what he focuses on when he's healing. He said something about so this is everything to do with his cosmovision. It's really the power of the universe, and doing good into the universe and putting good into the world has become a part of his cosmovision, and religion has had a part to do with that. Si usted está pasando esa información que usted había aprendido de su papá, si usted está pasando esa información a sus hijos también.
Justamente eso está sucediendo ahorita, ¿no? No solamente a mis hijos, sino también a mis nietos. Estos conocimientos he venido pasando a sí mismo, ¿no? Desde mucho antes, de generación en generación se ha venido pasando estos conocimientos, esta sabiduría, tanto para los hijos y para los nietos. Eso sí está pasando.
Hay una pregunta sobre el género, el rol del género con los curanderos. Ahorita, ¿es exclusivamente para los hombres o también hay mujeres practicando? Es espiritualista también.
Así es, Junta, ahora último ya hay cambios, ¿no? Hay igualdad de género. Anteriormente no hubo esto. Antes solamente era los hombres, pero ahora ya las mujeres también pueden practicar de la parte espiritual y la sabiduría ancestral.
Okay. En todas partes, en todas las comunidades se ve
todas
eso.
Las comunidades. Sí está sucediendo esto últimamente.
Entonces, tenemos una pregunta sobre tu percepción sobre medicina occidental y medicina tradicional. La pregunta es, ¿cuál es tu percepción? Y yo creo que podemos decir, yo creo que tengo otra pregunta. Si en los hospitales, por ejemplo, en Santo Domingo, están integrando medicina occidental y medicina tradicional.
Sobre este caso, por ejemplo, en otras provincias del Ecuador está sucediendo esto, ¿no? En los hospitales ya existen, ya junto con los médicos en el mismo hospital, ¿no? Pero en nuestra provincia aún no sucede, pero se está hablando mucho de esto últimamente. Últimamente ya está sucediendo y está en proceso de coordinación y un proceso de cómo ubicar a los curanderos junto en el hospital mismo para que la persona que necesiten, pues, que se acerque al curandero.
¿Y qué tal tu percepción de medicina occidental? ¿Piensa que hay un espacio para esto también?
Es tan solamente de coordinar, ¿no? Falta un poquito de organizarse bonito para poder hacer esto. Nos falta un poco de organización, más que todo en nuestra cultura, ¿no? Como usted sabe, pues tenemos como parte organizativa como tanto Cabildo Comunal y Consejo de Gobernación y la Gobernación, ¿no? Entonces, en este caso, ellos son los que tienen que coordinar con los médicos, con los hospitales, ¿no? Para que esto se dé. Entonces, falta eso un poco de coordinación y organizar bien.
Entonces, esta pregunta tiene que ver con el uso de medicina occidental con su gente. Por ejemplo, ¿cuántas personas, cuántos Tsa'chilas están usando medicina occidental y cuántos siguen haciendo medicina tradicional?
Por ejemplo, la mayoría de los Tsa'chila están utilizando medicina occidental. Sería muy poco, hablemos de 3%, estamos utilizando todavía la medicina tradicional.
¿Cuántos curanderos viven en tu comunidad? How many curanderos live in your
En mi comunidad estamos hablando de 10 personas.
hay mucha gente de afuera viendo para visitarte en la comuna.
Sí, es mucho más. La gente de afuera y de otros países, muchos visitan por la medicina tradicional. Más que todo lo que es el tema de la ayahuasca. La ayahuasca es una planta para nosotros, una planta sagrada que nos purifica y nos limpia tanto la parte energética, espiritual y, por qué no decir, corporalmente.
Diría que la mayoría de los visitantes llegaron para probar ayahuasca o para otras razones también. ¿Puedes darnos un ejemplo de como una anécdota de una persona que llegó, que era enfermo y usted lo trataba? ¿Hay algo interesante que puede comentar en esto? Siga.
Sí, muchas personas, ¿no? En este caso, ¿no? Pero sí ha habido como unas 3 o 4 personas que han sido un poco bastante, no críticos, sino más bien un poco, de pronto sería un poco, no sería como problema, sino un poco, le cogió un efecto un poco diferente de los demás. Este sería el sentido, ¿no? El efecto que da no es lo mismo a toda persona. Entonces, en este caso, pues yo he tenido una persona que, que cogió el efecto desde toda la noche hasta el mediodía, ¿no? Pero en la cual, pues, esta persona tuvo muchas visiones, ¿no? Hizo muchos viajes astrales, pero fue un cambio para esta persona que era, más que todo, una chica de Inglaterra, que ella quería dar un paso a la parte espiritual, pero ella practicaba lo que es la magia negra. Entonces, para pasar a lo que es de la luz, ella tuvo que sacrificar mucho. En este caso, por eso fue toda la noche hasta el mediodía tuvo ese efecto y esas visiones. Fue una gran lucha para ella porque ella estaba dando otro paso para pasar de lo negro a lo blanco, sería en este caso, ¿no?
Entonces, esta pregunta tiene que ver con la ciencia. ¿Cuántas personas están allí tratando de descubrir nuevas especies de plantas? ¿O solo se trata de pasar la información que ya tiene a las otras personas? ¿O usted y otras personas están aprendiendo de nuevas especies, están experimentando? ¿Hay una etapa de experimentación entre ustedes o solo están usando lo que han usado en el pasado? ¿Me entiende?
Sí, perfecto. Bueno, en esta parte, no sé los otros compañeros, porque de veramente no estamos cada uno por su lado, pero yo siempre he sido de una persona que me gusta siempre hacer nuevos experimentos, siempre me gusta aprender mucho más, ¿no? Entonces he estado siempre interesado más que todo en las plantas, ¿no? Y en este caso, como yo algún día creo que te he comentado de que las plantas surgen de por sí solo, mágicamente, ¿no? Mágicamente. Entonces, yo en este caso, por ejemplo, hay una planta que no lo tenía, pues está surgiendo y eso estoy utilizando. Claro, anteriormente existió 600 plantas tradicionales, medicinales, ¿ya? Y hoy estamos perdiendo casi la mayor parte.
¿Se llama crujiente? Ese planta que se usaba para COVID y también para malaria, ese se llama...
Hay para COVID ahorita, o sea, anteriormente solamente se utilizaba para baños de purificación, pero hoy se está utilizando para COVID. En este caso, las 3 puntas y la cascarilla.
Cascarilla, yes.
Cascarilla
So there's a plant called cascarilla, and then there's tres puntas, which these are, if you're interested, I can send you the scientific name afterwards, but they're essentially, they're coming up in places he's never seen them before. And I asked him before the webinar, when we were just kind of chatting informally, I asked him, well, do you think it's because these plants are their seed sources blowing in from the nearby reserve? And he said, yes, I think there's part of that, but he also said that I think that this is where his cosmovision comes in. He also thinks that these plants are just appearing magically to help him in what he's doing, and so he's able to basically bring those plants and make them more available to people, especially during a time like COVID. This plant, he said, was used quite a bit as a treatment for COVID, and it was quite effective. So that's kind of interesting to look at. But yeah, I do think, Kamal, to answer your question, that the research is definitely lacking, and the applied research where they're actually taking things that they've never used before and they're experimenting with them. I don't know how much of that is ongoing, and so yeah, it's like you kind of wonder about the evolution of this. Like, are we going to continue to learn? Are we going to continue to augment our knowledge of medicinal plants? And that's definitely something that is a concern if that's not happening, right? So hay ciertas enfermedades como cáncer que no hay una remedio tradicional donde tiene que acceder medicina occidental.
Sí, en este caso, por ejemplo, anteriormente pues nunca existió cáncer, ¿no? A lo mejor nuestros antepasados lo tuvieron, no sé, pero ahora último nosotros hemos detectado más fuerte cáncer cuando ya nosotros consumimos lo que es todo lo que es en este caso la carne de res, el pollo mismo que son criados a balanceado, ¿no? Entonces ahí es cuando nosotros nos damos cuenta que viene el cáncer, ¿no? Por lo que tiene mucha química. Entonces, ahora último, los que son de la Amazonía, yo tenía una conversación con ellos y ellos sí tienen remedio para el cáncer. En este caso, ellos me indicaban que era la escoba, que usted a lo mejor sí recuerda de la escoba que tenemos en nuestra comunidad. Eso es utilizado para el cáncer, pero yo no podría comprobar mientras tanto que yo no he probado con ese, ¿no? Pero hoy en día, pues, como ya no se está practicando para el cáncer, pues entonces no tenemos ese conocimiento, no lo tenemos en este momento.
Yeah, so he said, yes, there are, when it comes to cancer, which is becoming much more prevalent in the community, of course, agrochemicals are used widely in this region, and cancer is becoming more prevalent. There are only certain things that he can do as a shaman. His knowledge is limited with cancer, although he does have colleagues in the Amazon. He has friends and connections in the Amazon who have actually told him there's a bromeliad species that they refer to as a scoba. There's all these common names that make things a little bit more challenging, but they call it a scoba, and they use this to treat cancer, which they say is effective. So really interesting. When I was a volunteer, one of the illnesses I came down with was Leishmaniasis, and we were kind of facing this dilemma. It's like, well, here I am, and the WHO and medical practitioners would recommend that you use a tried and tested form to nip something in the bud like Leishmaniasis, which is a parasitic protozoan that can create lesions on the skin that begin to open up and can be fatal, right? So this is a potentially fatal illness. And it's like, well, do we take the risk and use traditional medicine, or do we go a more, proven route and use Western medicine? But lo and behold, this Western technique, this Western treatment, I was medevac to Panama City, and I was an outpatient for 3 weeks, where they put a hep lock in my hand and linked me up to an IV where I was administered a mercury-based antimony. So they were putting mercury into my body, which doesn't sound healthy to me. But that was the way I was treated. And it healed relatively quickly. After 3 weeks of treatment, I was starting to heal. On the flip side, Shuyun knew a variety of plants that he continued to actually put over because he had the same thing. I failed to mention that. He had the same cutaneous leishmaniasis, and he healed it entirely with medicinal plants. And so that's kind of a really good example of like, well, do I have to fly to Panama to get this done? And yet there are medicinal plants out there. They're just not, we haven't brought them to the public forefront, or they've been shunned, or I don't know what's happened, but the science isn't out there to really confirm that this works yet. So it's pretty interesting. And so with cancer, that might be a very similar, bet where, yes, there are plants that have shown to work, but are they clinically tested? Are they proven to work? in double-blind trials? Yeah, maybe not at this point. So very, very interesting. Una pregunta sobre las prácticas de plantas medicinales de curanderos en la comuna Tsa'chila. ¿Hay una diferencia de las prácticas tradicionales en las comunas que en otras comunidades de Ecuador? Decimos los shuar. ¿Ellos practican en una forma diferente? ¿Hay estilos diferentes o es muy similar?
Sí, en algunas partes sí, pero hay similitud a eso mismo, ¿no? O sea que de pronto lo harían en la misma forma que nosotros hacemos, sino que lo van a utilizar de pronto otras plantas que porque ellos lo tienen, ¿no? Pero en cambio nosotros acá en esa parte sí estamos perdiendo bastante, más que todo en las plantas tradicionales.
Entonces es muy similar, pero las diferencias es en las plantas que conozcan.
Así es. Así es.
So what he's saying is that the healing techniques are very similar. I think that there's I've done some reading on this, and there is quite a bit of interchange between the cultural groups. There's over 14 different cultural groups in Ecuador, and they'll often make migrations and they'll spend time with other curanderos to learn from them. So you see a lot of these, like the Olympiasa is very common throughout Ecuador, even common throughout Latin America, where many of the same techniques are used. But what he's saying, what Shuyun is saying, is that the plants are different. And so the Tsa'chila have a different subset of knowledge in regards to plants, because of course they live in a different area than say the Shuar, who are out in the Amazon, or the Quichua up in the Andes. And so that's the main difference. Shuyun is a fascinating individual. He's an inspiration to me to see every day he wakes up and living so close to a city that's modernizing so quickly, and having many temptations to essentially leave his traditions behind for more modern approaches. I really respect him for being the man he is today, and it's not always easy. There are plenty of people in the city. I've walked with Shuyun in the city and seen him punched in the shoulder violently hard, because someone called him a clown for wearing his traditional garb, and so it's those things like that he's confronting. We often forget. We are seeing a slow change in Santo Domingo. Actually, the city of Santo Domingo is now called Santo Domingo de los Tsa'chilas, and that was never. It was Los Colorados, which means the red-headed people, which to them was very derogatory, and it lacked respect. And so people like Shuyun demanded the respect, where they changed the name to Santo Domingo de los Tsa'chilas. We're seeing things like that, and they're becoming a lot more involved in the city and lifting up their culture, and we want to do everything to try to continue that. So Shuyun, muchísimas gracias. Duke ho'o, we say duke ho'o in the Safiki language. That's thank you very, very much. Duke ho'o para tu tiempo. Estamos bien agradecidos tener su presencia aquí, su conocimiento. Eres un hombre sabio y estamos bien agradecidos. Gracias.
Gracias a usted también, Kunta, y a los señores profesores, de igual, ¿no? Muchísimas gracias por tomar en cuenta y más que todo, ¿no? Como Tsa'chila también queremos conocer al mundo, porque somos de población, somos muy pequeños, pero sí queremos conocer a todo el mundo, que nos conozcan y de pronto ellos pueden necesitar de nuestra ayuda de la parte espiritual, pues entonces estamos dispuestos para ayudarlos, tanto espiritual, energético y de pronto corporal también, ¿no? También se la puede tratar con medicina tradicional.
Creo que tiene mucha razón con esto. Muchos de nosotros estamos perdiendo espiritualmente, y eso es muy importante. Hope everybody, thank you for being here, and I hope everybody enjoyed the webinar this afternoon. Yeah. So we'll see you again. Thank you, guys. Come on, so good to see you. It's been a while. Take care.
You too.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, Shuyun. Bien hecho. Bien hecho. Nos vemos en la próxima, ¿ok?
En la próxima.
Ya.
Bueno, kumita shti.
Ok, Shti, muchísimas gracias y
Bueno,
me voy a comunicar con usted ya después de
por
cortar.
interno. Ya.
Ok, cuídese.
Ok.